So one of the things I think we talk a lot about in business and in business culture is inclusion and being inclusive and including all of the different types of employees that we have. And difference is a really, really important word there because everyone is different and we embrace difference. We embrace the diversity in people, in race, in religion, in gender, and the diversity in thinking and behavior. And some of us will be more diverse than others in the way that we think and behave. And that, of course, leads us into this topic of neuroinclusion. And that's a big word that I'd love to unpack a little bit more today. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love perhaps if you could start by just telling us a bit about, who you are and your business and what you do with organizations.
So I am the managing director. I'm a coach and a trainer for Evolve, and we're a consultancy that work with organizations. We do executive coaching and we do a lot around neurodiversity. So we do leadership training, we do coaching, and we do awareness training. But what's really interesting is because there's been so many late diagnoses, we're finding that the business has gone a lot from executive coaching into executive coaching. Plus, I've also got this diagnosis, or we'll start working with somebody who will say, have you thought about? So lots of late diagnosis for people in business. So they're starting to build that awareness and pick up on things that maybe haven't been at the forefront before.
Yeah. So let's unpack diagnosis for a moment, because when we think about neurodiversity and neurodivergence, and the two are different, right? So I think it's important that we distinguish between those two, and then talk about the diagnosis piece, which of course is a clinical threshold more than it is a kind of black and white yes or no thing, right? I know myself, and I'm what I like to call neurologically spicy, which means I do have some letters after my name, and none of them are qualifications, right? So I know that I have my stuff.
Yep.
And I think beyond my clinical diagnosis, which for me was about awareness and about understanding, like I wanted to know stuff about myself, and that was the process that I went through. And beyond that, I don't really care about the label anymore. I care about what I experience and how I show up in the world and how I experience the world around me and what I can do differently. So, a big question, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergence, let's just unpack that.
Well, I think in the terms of neurodiversity is the big overarching term, isn't it, for all the conditions that come under it. And neurodivergence is how the individual experiences. So people say, neurodivergence as in this is my condition, these are how I experience it.
Yeah.
My thoughts around this are really varied. And I think if we're unpacking this fully, the first place we need to really start is we talk about diversity. But if we think about brains like thumbprints, no two people have the same fingerprint. So why are our brains going to be the same?
Yeah. So
we know if we look at neurodiversity just as the word, it's brain and it's differences in the brain.
Yeah.
No two brains develop the same.
So thank you, because that's exactly where my brain goes when we talk about the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergence. Like you talked about the conditions that sit under neurodiversity being the neurodivergent conditions and or traits, right? Neurodiversity is like an everyone thing, in my view. Like my experience of the world is that everyone is neurodiverse, i.e. that thumbprint, that, that DNA that is totally unique to you, that is your neurological wiring.
Absolutely.
And some of us are a bit more spicy than others.
Yeah. And if we think about it, brains develop differently and we have different strengths in different brains. Yeah. And what was really interesting is I was recently at a conference and this amazing gentleman had experienced dyslexia in order to access the technology he needed and the software he needed in order to perform in his education. It was £25,000. So he had developed a product that people could easily access. And part of developing this product was he worked with 100,000 people and he did research just on I think it was 8 of the brain functions like memory, recall, things like that. And out of these 100,000 people, and this really shocked me, he said 10% were what would be considered neurotypical. So would fall within that neurotypical. 70% had some neurodivergence. So what we're looking for there is that the line isn't straight. So we're seeing peaks of strength peaks of challenges within the brain, but not to the point of diagnosis. So it's not meeting that clinical criteria.
Yeah.
But there's diversity in there. There's difference. And then 20% would have met diagnostic criteria.
Right.
So that tells us a lot about our brains. And actually, if we look at evolution, if our brains didn't develop the way they're developing, how are we going to evolve? How are we going to keep up with the technology, the changes in the world, the changes in people?
Yeah.
You know, we just can't as humans evolve without it.
And it is about keeping up with all the changes. And I think, so businesses, I think, are struggling at the moment to keep up with the changes in which we talk around neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And this, and again, for me, it was never about a label. The label was a byproduct of a diagnosis, a clinical threshold. Beyond that, it's just about embracing that difference and understanding that difference and being aware of that difference. But we do have a bit of an obsession with labels. And I get it. Like, it's a little bit like, I'm going to go in metaphor world for a moment. If you were cooking something and you went to the cupboard, right? And, you know, you tasted the dish, you know, it needs a little bit more garlic, or it needs a little bit more chili, or whatever. You can see the kind of dishes that I make. But you need the labels on the stuff in the cupboard to know what you're reaching for.
Absolutely.
So labels are important because you know what to do when you read that label. But they're also quite dangerous, aren't they? Like,
absolutely. And that was coming to mind, because if you've met one person with ASD or ADHD, you've met one person with that condition. How it presents for everyone is really different. But I think what the diagnosis is giving people is that aha moment, that awareness. You know, yes, lots of people can do it this way, I do it that way, and that's okay because my brain works like this. So when you truly work with people, the diagnosis is about navigating self-awareness so that people can navigate the world in the best way that works for them without comparisons to things that don't matter. And if we look at kind of embracing that and we pull that into the workplace, it's not about creating massive changes. It's about adapting and tweaking things in order for people to navigate in a way that they can thrive and not get burnt out on things that may not even be relevant to their role or the wider business objective.
And if you rewind the clock back to a time where we didn't talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence, it wasn't that it didn't exist. It was that it didn't have a word or a label or a conversation. But we did build business cultures and environments around the people that we employ and their strengths and their blind spots and what helps them to be at their best. And that is embracing the diversity of thinking and behavior, just without that label, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, something we've got to remember too is there wasn't a diagnostic criteria for adults, you know, until I think it was like 2012. So we didn't have this level of understanding. But what was really interesting is I went and did some training in a business that was different to kind of the corporate. It was warehouse setting. And there was lots of different characters that had worked in the organization since they were apprentices, and some were in their 60s, and a family-run business. And the way the MD spoke about every single individual, he knew them. He knew how to make them work at their best. He knew that he's like, oh, don't worry about Barry. He doesn't come up for tea, comes up 10 minutes after because he likes it when it's quieter. And it was just how everyone worked together. Like, we just work like this and it works for us, and everyone did great stuff.
So that could be just, you know, disguised, if you like, as just sort of personal and social preferences.
Absolutely.
Prefers it when it's quieter. I prefer environments that are quieter because I hear every conversation in a room except the one that I'm in. I can't have a conversation in an open plan office and environment because I'll hear everything but the one that I'm supposed to be focused on.
And I want to be involved in that conversation as well.
You'll hear something that absolutely takes
much more interesting
takes your excitement
than what I'm
and
meant to be focusing on.
But just so going back to that kind of understanding people, and someone pointed this out to me actually a couple of days ago, and it was one of those aha moments for me actually. I talk a lot. One of my favorite words is percolation. Right? I love percolating. I love letting stuff just sit for a bit and, you know, reflect and think about it overnight, maybe over a few days, and I'll come back to it. And when I come back to it, I call those times the percolation pit stop. Like, I've been percolating and now I'm pulling in to the pit lane and we're going to talk about the thing that I've been thinking about, right? And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and they pointed out to me, that's why you can't, and me being the you here, right? She said, that's why you can't give outcomes and actions and what you're going to do next at the end of a meeting. And I was like, yeah, I can't. I don't work like that. I need it to percolate. I need to let that settle. I need the snow globe, for another metaphor, to kind of settle into a picture. I need that to happen. How many times have I been forced at the end of a meeting, because meeting structure says you have to come out with an action, an outcome, a decision, and my brain's not ready for that. And that's like and that's an adjustment that I have to make. And businesses with employees who think perhaps like me or have that potential preference, they need to think like that too, right?
They do. But if we rewind this back, you're very self-aware and very accepting of, actually, this is how my brain processes. I have that snow globe, or I percolate, or whatever I do, and I allow time for processing. And the language in our office now is just processing that. And so we know that. But imagine not taking a step back. We don't have that awareness about self. Okay. The expectations from the organization are, you need to provide it. Our brains are not online. Then it goes into panic mode. And then add a bit of RSD, and we've got somebody leaving a meeting who's maybe spending the whole evening not feeling good about themselves, or not feeling like they can do their job. Not because they didn't contribute well in the meeting, not because their ideas aren't great, not because the outcomes they think of will not be amazing.
Permission to squirrel.
Go.
Right. So, because you said two things there that really made me want to go, oh, right. So one of those things about sort of the awareness bit, and then the labeling, right? So, because we were saying, labeling can be, really helpful for clinical diagnosis and all that, and equally really unhelpful if it just tars everyone with a similar brush.
Absolutely.
Sometimes what you just said there, I'm processing. What you're labeling there is your experience.
Absolutely.
You're labeling your behavior, you're labeling your action, your activity, and that can be hugely helpful for people around you to label out loud, like the thing that you need or the thing that you're doing. And I think that's I wanted to stop there, because I think that's such an important thing for people in business to be able to, when I use psychometric tools, one of the things I love about psychometric tools, it gives people a model and therefore some labels to use.
Absolutely.
I need to bring a bit of blue energy to this.
Brilliant.
Anyone that's done psychometrics with colors involved will know what I mean there. Or I feel like I need to go a bit outcome focused. Let's go full red on this moment. And that gives people like an accessible way of articulating. So I think that's really important, that articulation of the experience, rather than just labeling the condition or the trait.
Absolutely. And that's how we always work with people. It's like, how does this work for you? What language do you use around it? How do you feel about that? And if we look at the parallels between, like psychometrics with colors, if we've got the understanding that actually my brain works like this, and my ADHD works like this. So my ADHD will probably work very differently to yours, and the same in different times. But if I can give it context and I have self-awareness, then I have the language to communicate my experience and navigate it in a way that enables me to thrive no matter where I am, without leaving feeling like absolute rubbish. I can't work in this, I don't fit. And that's the thing, isn't it?
I think everyone, whether neurodivergent or not, that kind of wanting to belong and wanting to fit, like that's we could go straight back to Maslow and his hierarchy of needs.
Absolutely, I use that a lot.
That belonging is really important. I want to come back to something else that you said though a moment ago, because you dropped an acronym and a condition-based acronym, a label. You said RSD. Now, I know what RSD is. A lot of people will have heard about RSD, might not know what RSD is, and might not know how many people, to some degree or another, will experience it as part of their neurological makeup. So could you just give us a bit of a brief overview of what RSD is and how it shows up in the business world?
Yeah. I wish I knew what RSD was. I'm old now, so 30 years ago, I wish I knew what it was. So RSD stands for rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And the belief and the understanding around it is the brain is something like 100 times more sensitive to negative or neutral received feedback. And this is the important bit. So it's not what's said. It doesn't need to be negative. It's how the brain perceives it. And it causes a massive nervous system response. So lots of people will experience it in lots of different ways. But if we imagine that kind of fight, freeze, stress response triggering in ourselves, some people have described it as actual physical pain. And I think it's Alex Partridge that does.
Yeah.
There was actually a picture of him explaining his RSD.
I saw the picture on social. He was on the floor in a corridor because a podcast guest had cancelled.
Yeah.
Right. And that rejection, he felt so viscerally that he was like completely, on the floor. And praise that he shared that and felt
very vulnerable place.
Comfortable enough to share that vulnerability, because it is like, I don't like labels. I see the importance of them. And RSD is a label that means so much more than just 3 letters, because it's those moments that people don't see. You said something really interesting there when you started explaining it, which is negative or neutral.
Yeah.
Neutrality could be perceived
absolutely
as really negative.
Absolutely. And if you think, when we're taking in information and we're filtering the information, we're basing it on our own beliefs and values, how we feel that day, how we feel about that person. So how the brain processes it, if it's more sensitive, it's going to go to the negative side, isn't it? It's going to. And the interesting thing is nobody's immune from it, no matter how successful you are. I've worked with, partners in law firms that have had check-ins that have been absolutely fine, but their perception was I didn't get enough praise. And it's not because they're seeking praise.
Yeah.
It's because they're away from this kind of rejection or, what does this mean?
Praise is, like, how long have we got? We could talk about this for hours. I think
I'm in for the
day. Praise is such an important thing for those that need it. And by the way, not everyone needs praise and recognition. Like some people will, will take it, and equally, it's a little bit like, like when you try and feed a toddler, like, and they're like, I don't want that. And that can be sometimes a reaction to being praised or having that recognition. And yet actually praise is important. And it's an important part of the feedback mechanism. Mm-hmm. And feedback, if it's just praise, isn't really feedback.
Not authentic.
And if it's not praise, it could be the opposite of, that which is criticism. And equally, that's not feedback if it's not developmental. So I think businesses generally have quite a big responsibility, and one that I think as businesses we fall short on a lot of the time, of giving genuine, proper, developmental, useful, specific, balanced feedback that includes some praise and includes some areas that people need to work on and can develop on. But just coming back to that neutrality, I sometimes say that silence is worse than violence.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean that literally. Like I'm sure if someone was coming at me with a hammer, I'd rather just take them silent than with the hammer.
Have you had RSD episode? I think I'll go for the hammer.
Right. And maybe that's it. Sometimes actually, I'd rather take the hammer than the visceral feeling you get from RSD. Yeah. But it is that kind of, that the silence in a business is actually, like, truly for some people violent.
Absolutely.
Not knowing, not being told, not like just nothing. And it's not praise for the sake of praise. It's not well done that you shouldn't need to be told well done for. Like, competency is competency.
That's not authentic though, is it? And, and I use feedback all the time when I'm teaching people about RSD. And my biggest success for my own RSD has been using growth mindset models. So, and NLP models around there's no failure, there's only feedback. So what I look to teach leaders is actually you need to be doing feedback all the time. People need to know where they stand.
Yeah.
If you look at kind of gray areas for people, whether or not they're neurotypical, if there is such thing, or not.
God, can we challenge that? Is there such thing as neurotypical? Or is that just a posh way of trying to say normal without saying normal?
But there is no.
Right? Because that's the thing.
Most
people would say, well, you can't say normal because what's normal? And everyone's different. So they've gone for typical. And I'm not here to challenge the term neurotypical. I do get it. I do understand. Is it that neurotypical is the neuromajority? Like, is it the neurological difference that sits within the 80% of those that aren't clinically diagnosed? Is that what we would call neurotypical?
I assume so. But I feel the more that we learn about the brain and how the brain develops, the more we'll kind of get away from such firm labels. And the more it will be about kind of people just finding the strengths within their brain.
Yeah.
And I always think, our brain is like a muscle in the body. We know how to train our body.
Yeah.
Why aren't we investing the same time and understanding to our brains?
Yeah. Well, because it comes back to awareness again, right?
Yeah.
You said the word awareness and a load of times already in our conversation, and we mentioned psychometrics. So I don't think you would struggle to find anyone in business that would not say, yeah, I believe in personality. So as in, I don't think there's anyone that challenges the concept that we all as human beings have a personality.
Absolutely.
And with the help of people like Carl Jung and others after, we've identified ways in which we can explore traits, qualities, strengths, blind spots, call it what you will, whatever model you use, we'll have a different way of talking about it. But the different things that make up your personality are those differences. And that's the diversity of how you show up and show out in the world.
Absolutely.
And I don't think we would find anyone in business, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's someone out there that would absolutely debunk the idea that personalities exist. I don't know. I'd love to meet them and ask them why they don't believe in it. But if that's the case, then are we getting closer and closer to a world where neurodiversity, the full spectrum of everyone, is just not something we challenge anymore? It's just a matter of fact. Like, we are all neurodiverse. Some, call it 20% or whatever, will have neurodivergent conditions, qualities, traits, clinical diagnoses.
Yeah. And actually, something happened in a training course I was delivering the other day, and it was for the leaders. And it really was one of those aha moments for me. And it was an aha moment for everyone on the course, because I always say, it's not about, making big adjustments and changing work patterns and doing this and doing that. It's about small adjustments that make the working environment accessible to everyone in a way that they can thrive and do their jobs really well.
Yeah.
And if we're doing that, businesses flourish. We know that. And somebody very senior said, well, I nearly quit my job. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. Tell me about this. And it was, there must have been a lot of psychological safety, because he was quite open about it. He said, I'd moved from my own office to an open plan office, and the noise was unbearable. And I would be really stressed. I was getting really cross with people. I couldn't think straight. So I put my noise cancel. I got some noise cancelling headphones, and I worked with them, and now I work fine. And I just looked to the group and I went, GC, it doesn't need to be big.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need a label. Yeah. And we don't need to go down all these tracks. At the moment, we're going down all these pathways because I think we've created environments that aren't as flexible as they need to be for people. And we've done it for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
But as we've evolved.
And it's confusing, actually, because one of the things that I think has come about over the last few years, decade or more, and particularly exacerbated during COVID, was the almost forcefully needing to embrace hybrid and flexible working patterns and behaviors because of what was going on in the world. But that flexibility and that adjustment. So I very much, and this is where I want to really dive into your experience here, because I sit in the world of awareness, right? Everything that I have sits with my experience and what I see and work with others and their experience and the awareness that can give us. Adjustments are what comes after the awareness if we are going to embrace what that awareness is teaching us and utilize it for good effect. So you mentioned one of those adjustments there around sort of, open plan office, working environment with lots of people, lots of noise, the hubbub of excitement on a Monday morning, maybe noise cancelling headphones. It's quite simple. What are the other things that you see and that you introduce with clients then that are simple adjustments that come from a place of awareness from an individual or from someone who knows and understands individuals? So it comes from somewhere. What are the other adjustments that you see?
I think what we need to remember about the adjustments first and foremost is they'll be different for everyone.
Right.
So everyone's experience of the workplace will be different, and everyone's environment will be different. So we need to find a place, that middle ground that creates that environment for them to thrive. And I always go back, in the right environment, everyone can thrive. And I always picture a brain being watered, Yeah. We don't put a plant in the corner with no sunlight and no water and expect it to grow.
Oh, I do.
Well, yeah, me too. I was just pretending. So it can be really simple things. So once you get that awareness and you know yourself, you will know what things will trigger your nervous system. You know what things will distract focus. You may be aware of things that will lead to burnout for you. So we have done so many different things for different people. And the simplicity is sometimes the brilliance. So what I always say to people is I worked with a lady who had an ASD diagnosis, and she could never concentrate in the office. Never. She would go home. So she would be in the office all day because she knew she had to be there pre-COVID. And she'd look and she'd go, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I can actually start work now. And she'd go home and start work. And she'd work late into the night. And she's like, I'm just so burnt out. And I was like, because you're working, 2 days in one. And we tried all these different things. So she had noise cancelling headphones, and she had things to roll her feet. So we're trying to, balance the nervous system, and stress balls and all different types of things. We had bells and whistles. We turned down the lights. And one day we just had this aha moment. So I did a floor walk with her, and I was like, can you just sit in your seat for a second? And she looked at me, and I was like, how does it feel when you sit there? And she's like, straight away, uncomfortable. So turn your seat around the other way. And she turned her seat, and she's like, oh, I hate people approaching me from behind.
Right.
So what had happened was she'd gone from an office with 2 people that was closed off to facing with her back on the walkway.
Yeah.
So all we did was just got the people in from the office team. They turned her desk around. Nobody could approach her from behind.
Yeah.
Perfect. And she could work in the office.
And it's so
Cost
simple.
Nothing.
Right. Cost nothing. It's so simple. Well, one of the things you talk about the moment there that you help that individual find what worked for her.
Yeah.
And there's something fortunate in businesses where they are working with someone who can do that work. Some businesses don't have the luxury of working with people like you to help their teams. And in those businesses, there can be an expectation, perhaps an assumption-based expectation, that managers and leaders should be able to understand human beings and what works for them and. There has to be a compromise somewhere between the two, right? Because, I'm sure you would love if everyone would just call you and say, can you come in and help?
Yeah, that'd be great.
It'd be great.
Put my number up at the end.
And in reality, though, not every business is going to be able to.
No.
So what can those businesses that don't have the capacity, the resource, the opportunity to work with an external, what should they be doing and could they be doing to support team members?
The first thing that I always say is you don't need to be an expert. You just need to listen to your people. And if all people are different, they will come with different things anyway. So it doesn't need to be, somebody's got a label or somebody's got a diagnosis or somebody's got a condition. It just needs to be, I've noticed that you're really squinting or you've had a lot of headaches. How are you finding the light? Or being open. And I always say if we want to talk about inclusion in any way, shape or form, we need to create psychological safety. And so if you as the line manager or the organization leader can create that psychological safety, then people are going to approach you with the challenges that they face.
Yeah.
You don't need to be an expert.
So how do we create, because I agree with you. I think psychological safety is like a must have. Like I create it when I'm working with a small group in a training room. Like you create the space where the stuff that needs to get said, gets said, where the things that need to be explored, get explored, where the moments that need to be experienced are experienced.
Absolutely.
That's what psychological safety looks like in practice. And it's not like a switch that you can just flick on. It's something that, we've worked hard in our careers and in our work to learn how to do that. And even though we've done that, I don't know if I could give you an instruction manual that would tell you how to do it. Like it's naturally built in, right? So how do you create psychological safety? If you are hearing that and thinking, yeah, I'd like that. What is it? And how do I get it? Like, what are the steps?
So we can talk about loads of different theories and we could take 5,000 million steps through them. I like to simplify everything. Everything needs to be simple that I explain to people because that's how I process. I think that the greatest success I've seen for creating psychological safety is using a feedback model where people know where they stand. They have trust. They can make mistakes. They can learn from those experiences and they can grow. So what we want to create is a workforce where you trust them to go out to do the work. And if things didn't go to plan, we are confident to give feedback in a way that promotes their growth.
Yeah.
And they're confident to come back to us and say, I didn't get this right and I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's that you mentioned one of the NLP beliefs of excellence there. There is no failure, just feedback and learning. And of course we could challenge, because sometimes we fail, right? Sometimes things go wrong, right?
Things do go wrong.
So it
we stop?
It isn't necessarily that there isn't failure. It's that feedback and learning comes from every failure. Now, obviously, repeated failure in the same thing over and over again, then we're starting. There's a performance issue there, and we need to handle that in a different way. But it's that model of feedback and learning, and the psychological safety that if you get it wrong, we're going to learn together what to not get it wrong next time. Right?
Absolutely. And that's the environment I like to create everywhere. But actually, when I teach this in organizations, and when I teach this with my coachees, and when I learn it myself, I need to learn these skills too. What happens is the gray areas disappear, the anxiety reduces, the creativity, the ideas, the innovation comes to light, and people turn up with confidence. And if we look at things like, if we're looking at somebody with an ASD profile, so autism, gray area is really confusing. So it may be that they're not getting on with work because they don't know what's really right or really wrong, because the feedback's not being clear enough.
Right. Yeah.
There's no gray area.
Yeah.
We look at people that experience RSD, if I can come back to you and say, I haven't done this right, then we can teach somebody that experiences RSD. That's fine. We're going to learn from this bit, and we're going to let go of that bit. And over the years, if you do this well, and this is what I've done for 7 years with myself, my instinct isn't to go straight to that kind of nervous system response, probably about 20% of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be 150%,
Yeah.
So what then happens is you don't need to be defensive. You don't need to go home and beat yourself up. Your well-being doesn't need to be impacted by the fact your spreadsheet doesn't add up, and this is, this is how easy it can be. And I remember early in my businesses when it was quite vulnerable, I could, my RSD could make me quite defensive. And when I implemented the feedback model, my own experience was, fine, what is it? And what changed was my business got better. I got better. I grew, I pushed myself, I became uncomfortable. But not with the RSD, but with great new experiences.
And it's some of what you're describing there is rooted in beliefs and values that have come from awareness and learning and that growth that the journey that you as an individual have gone on.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, so, businesses, and we've talked before on this show about values and the importance of values that don't just sit on the wall as a word, but actually get lived and breathed in a business. And sometimes it's about having those values that lead to the moments of awareness, the moments of, so one of, core thing for me is scrutiny is a power for good. And I repeat that time and time again to myself and to others that I work with, so that we as a collective can embrace scrutiny. Like if we don't scrutinize it, then we're just accepting it, and maybe accepting it will lead to it not being good enough. And therefore it might lead to a failure. And if we feel failure as RSD rejection, then right? So scrutiny being a power for good, there's no feedback, no failure, feedback and learning. All of these things are like beliefs and belief statements that don't have to be true or false. And that's fascinating about beliefs. They don't have to be true or false. They just ideally have to work well for you. And we can pick and choose the ones that will work well for us. So there's something really important there that you've talked about those values, those beliefs, and the deliberate choice to install the ones that close that gap between something happening and the way you respond to it, closing that gap so that you get the growth from that moment. Let's go back to inclusion again, because so some people, by the way, will hear the qualities, the conditions, the traits, the diagnoses. They will hear those words, RSD, ASD, ADHD. They'll hear those things and immediately panic that they're dealing with someone who has a disability. Or what if I get it wrong? And employment law is there for good reason and is strict and is tough, and I can't put a foot wrong in these areas. And that can put people off like dealing with stuff, can it? Yeah,
it can. And interestingly, there were two very senior employment lawyers on one of my courses recently. And I said, this falls under the Disability Act? And they went, sometime.
Right.
And so what they explained was different organizations were kind of going into that panic mode. I have to do this and I have to do that. And so we need to take a step back and we need to understand, what's the business need, what's the need of the person, and simplify it and really strip it back. So sometimes what happens is we hear a label, we hear a term, and we're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with that? Sit down, have a conversation, talk to the person. It may not be something that's a massive challenge. It may be really simplistic. What we need to do is treat people as people, understand that, their brains are different.
Yeah.
And just try and create an environment where they can work really well for you and you can embrace that.
It's all part of performance management.
Yeah.
Managing the performance of another and supporting them to increase their level of performance. And like, phrase it how you will. This is all part of performance managing people. And I don't think that's ever been, as a concept, that's ever been challenged in business. Like, we know that that's part and parcel of leading and managing people.
I've got to say this because quite often people panic with me and they're like, well, they can't do their job properly. And I'm like, okay, let's step back. So we know in law, people will need to develop their business, they'll need to network. And so I have a lot of quite senior people that are autistic and they need to go to conferences or they need to network. They can do this, right? Just because they may not read social clues or, they may suffer from the kind of social burnout, they can do this. So what we do when we look at adjustments is, so one of my coaches was going to a conference. So I was like, okay, so let's have a look at it. What do you need? Well, I need sensory breaks. I need time where I don't need to talk and socialize with people. Okay, what does that look like? And so we broke down the weekend and we put the breaks in and we communicated the breaks and we communicated to the people that were delivering the conference, actually, is there a quiet space? And because those conversations are being had, they felt safe to do those things. They were able to regulate their body and they had a positive experience. They weren't burnt out by the end of the conference. And same with, how do we network? Does it need to be, somewhere where it's very noisy? Does it need to be over a drink or over a meal? Does it need to be informal? There's so many different tools we've got to network and to build our business. If we can capture the strengths of that individual and then tailor how they're performing this, but maybe a bit different, it may be better. And definitely for that individual, it is better.
So something really important that you highlighted there, and that is important. And actually, maybe I run the risk, I suppose, of assuming and knowing that everyone knows this, but there is no can't with all of this. It's just some cans are more difficult than others. And therefore, that's where the adjustments come in, right?
Absolutely.
There are so many other stories that I'd like you to tell me and examples of where this has worked brilliantly and also areas that you've seen like it not work so well and what we can learn with the no failure, just feedback and learning what we can learn from those moments. I said before about, not every organization has the luxury of working with an external partner on this. And yet there are those opportunities. There are those opportunities to learn more about this work and to be more inclusive as a culture and as an organization. If you were giving like a starter for 10 to an organization that can be done both internally and externally, so whether it's someone working with you or something they start a journey themselves, like what are the starting points that you would recommend to an organization who wants to build more of a neuro-inclusive culture?
I think it would start with just building a basic awareness and understanding. What I think is a really great tool is if we look at something like an adjustments passport. So it doesn't have to be long and complicated. It could just be, a form that you complete that gets reviewed. And it's really important because what works adjustment-wise for someone one day may not work the next day. It may only work sometimes. Doesn't mean it's ineffective. And this is what we need to remember. So we need to be reviewing, checking on where people are at. They might try things that don't work or did work for a short time. It doesn't mean it's unsuccessful. And this is the key thing, because our brains, our environments are ever changing. When we look at adjustments that aren't like, it's a ramp, it's something physical. We need to be really open that, that worked for a while, but it's not working anymore. What do we need to do? What do we need to change? So formalizing it in a way that gives kind of a procedure around it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be formal in the context. So we're going to do this together. It can be an informal discussion, but we'll formalize it on this. So you know where you stand, you know when it will be reviewed, and you know that you've got that open conversation with the individual. They're not coming to you at the point of burnout and saying, I can't work, I've been signed off.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
And therefore because you've got a tool like that, being more aware of the changes that are happening and the metrics, like we love a metric in business,
yes,
right?
we do.
We love a dashboard, we love a KPI. Yeah. And it's some of those human metrics that perhaps are missing. We talked before about praise and, those that might suffer from the, latter end of the spectrum of RSD who might need to hear that praise and that recognition. Of course, there are, processes and policies in place in businesses sometimes for how do we go about, bigging people up, giving kudos, telling people that they've done a good job. Where do you see it work, and how do you see it work? Like, what does praise done well look like in a business?
For me, it's just part of the culture. If praise is done well, it's just part of the feedback model. It's just us being really authentic. I really love that piece of work. That was really good, or the client really liked that. And it's to be as comfortable with giving that positive. I don't like to say positive and negative feedback. Feedback is feedback. So if you're doing something great, feed it back. If you're doing something that's not quite where it needs to be, feed it back, learn and grow. So whenever I see it working well in an organization, it's that whole conversation of, exactly where you stand.
Yeah.
You're doing great stuff, and you were told when you're doing great stuff, and when there's learning, there's learning. And
sometimes publicly. Like I have clients where, sometimes that email from the chief exec that's gone out to the whole business to say, well done for doing ...
Yeah.
Like just the fact that communication went out publicly, that individual will have lived off that for weeks and weeks. That excitement, that dopamine hit that they got from that public recognition. And it is that specific feedback that is baked into a culture. It's that,
Absolutely.
You're doing really well at this thing, and let's just recognize that. And that becomes part and parcel of a feedback dynamic.
Absolutely. And I like that, giving it, what you were doing well at. Just like, you're doing a great job. What does that mean? Where am I doing a great job?
Being specific, right?
Yeah. Give it some context.
Yeah. Sharon, I know that you work with lots of organizations to do this work, and it's important work. If anyone wanted to find out more about how you go about, this is that moment for a sort of shameless plug, if you like. How can people find you? How can they get in touch with you?
So I am on LinkedIn, so just Sharon Wallerson, and we have a website which is at www.evolve-d.co.uk.
No one ever knows their own website address, do they? I mean, it's hard to,
We're in the process of changing it. So I'm like, we'll do a redirect.
Like the home of business networking, Sharon Wallerson on LinkedIn, if anyone wants to find out more. Sharon, thank you so much. I could talk for hours and hours and hours on this topic. I feel like we've just scraped the surface. But for me, like, we've talked a lot about awareness beyond labels, understanding and acceptance that neurodiversity, there will come a time where that is just the standard for everyone. 100% of people are neurodiverse in some way, shape or form, in the same way that 100% of the people have a personality in some way, shape or form. I love the fact that we can talk about awareness whilst looking through the lens of, the neurotypical, the majority that don't have the diagnoses, and of course those that do, and understanding what some of those diagnoses do for people and how they show up. Praise and recognition, and actually building a culture of psychological safety, and how we can actually work with individuals to help them become more aware of what they need and what we need to adjust with them and for them to get the best from their performance. Again, I could go on and on and on. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today on Rewarding Relationships.
Oh, thank you.